because I would like to transform the feelings and the emotions that the public of Israel is going through over the last 15 days since the massacre in the Gaza area has started. I was thinking to myself, what would be best to start this conversation with, and how should the outline be? And there were several directions that I was thinking of taking. One of them was to just talk about my master's degree about investigating and researching the Holocaust period. I'll talk about it in a second. And second was, and that's the one I chose, is to talk about the 5 stages of grief that Kubler-Ross, whom you probably know well, has spoken about. In the morning of October 7th, on Shabbat, there was an unprecedented missile attack on Israel, including the city that I live in, which is in the heart of the country, halfway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And the attack seemed unusual in its magnitude. 2,500 missiles were shot at us within half an hour. 2,500 missiles. Just imagine that a community the size of your area would be shot with 2,500 missiles at one point during half an hour. It seems so unreal that even though it was a holiday and Shabbat, Simchat Torah, I thought to myself right away that I need to go up to my roof, because it was pretty scary to go out of the house, and record an immediate message to my community saying, it seems like something big is happening, unexpected, all by surprise, in the middle of Simchat Torah, and we should stay together. And if you need me, you know my number, although it's Shabbat and despite the holiday. So I went up to the roof. There is a way to sneak up to the roof. I call it the Anne Frank path. Unfortunately, it seemed to be more relevant to call it an Anne Frank path, because there is also a small room on top of the roof that you can hide in. Never thought about it before. And I recorded a message to the community at about 10:30 in the morning, sent it all out, asked my staff to get ready, make sure that our shelters are ready for the next day, because I thought this will be an attack that will continue, never imagining this is going to be a massacre of the kibbutzim, villages and towns surrounding the Gaza Strip. That since the government of Ariel Sharon made the decision to evacuate all Israelis from the Gaza Strip, we believe that the Gaza Strip will become the Monaco of the Middle East. With the hundreds of millions of dollars that were funneled into Gaza, they could build one of the most beautiful seashores in the world and bring tourism there. From the days that Israel still was holding Sinai, I remember us driving through the Gaza Strip towards the south. Some of you may remember the city of Yamit in the old days. Gaza used to have the most beautiful beaches, the most gorgeous sea, the best fish, and the potential there for tourism was unbelievable. But they chose differently. And they chose differently, like the classical anti-Semitism that we face throughout history. in Europe and elsewhere. Unfortunately, during the last few days, including speaking to your senior staff, I hear that you're facing that same anti-Semitism all over again. It's not anti-Semitism because Jews control the banks. They don't. It's not anti-Semitism because Jews are in the financial areas. No. It's not because we win many of the Nobel Prizes. It's because we exist, and we have to understand that our existence creates this hatred, and this hatred creates their reason to demolish us. Hundreds of terrorists invaded the border right after the heavy shells stopped, conquering all the villages, kibbutzim, and some of the cities that are surrounding the Gaza Strip, an area that between you and me were never in dispute, an area that the United Nations in 1947 voted for the new state of Israel, regardless of the dispute over other areas. The Negev area, which Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel and the first minister of defense, loved so much, the Negev area was never in dispute, was never questionable. The area that was attacked, it is important to remember and understand, was an area that people that are seeking for peace lived in. So we felt complete shock. We felt isolated. We felt that it just can't be. And as the television studios opened their newsrooms and more information began coming, and the helplessness of those sitting in sealed rooms in that area in the Negev, Western Negev, can't get any help, neither from the army nor from the police. Nobody could get there fast enough to save them, to stop the massacre, the most brutal, disgusting Nazi massacre of Hamas ISIS that was taking place that day. Hamas ISIS is not interested in seeking for peace and or finding a solution to the Palestinian problem. They want us to be gone. They want you to be dead. That's it. No negotiations are on the table from their perspective. It's either Israel is gone and all the Jews of the world are dead like the Nazis wanted, or the game will not be over. For hours, we were talking to ourselves and among ourselves saying, it can't be. Where's the IDF? Where's the strongest army in the Middle East? Or not just the Middle East? This disbelief, this denial of the situation lasted for about 72 hours. But the scenery coming from the south, the social media that showed the brutality of the massacre, the hatred of the terrorists, could not penetrate. You could not stand and say anymore, it can't be. You saw it in your face. As my master's degree was involving a lot of Holocaust research, I've seen the movies that your brave soldiers, American soldiers, who came to free those in the death camps. So until a certain point, you could say, can't be. I mean, it's just too much. It's impossible. And at a certain point, when you see the films that filmmakers from the American army took in 1945, you just have to admit that it can be. That there are animals, human animals, that behave like this. Let me just try and show you a short movie. I'm not sure it's going to work. I'll do my best to work it, to make it work. Rabbi Blake, please let me know if it works.
Yep, I'll let you know.
Can you hear?
On a peaceful Saturday morning,
Yes.
they're home in Kentucky. Mama and Papa Bear watched little baby bear lamb. The howl sounded outside.
I'll go check.
Baby bear perked his ears. Good morning. Mama Bear. Papa looked for advice. Don't worry, Mama Bear said, and covered his eyes. Baby yelled in fear. More, little one. Mama Bear is here. They're getting here. I'm coming, my love. Mama Bear is here.
We could not deny the situation. We just couldn't. And then comes the anger. You come. You tell me, who was I not angry at? The government, the ministers, the army, the police, myself, my relatives who live in the south. How many times did I tell you, Michal and her 2 children? How many times did I tell you that growing up in the periphery is not for you? I grew up in Kibbutz Neot Mordechai in the northern border of Israel throughout the 60s and 70s with terrorist attacks. I told you that you don't have to live there. Single mother with 2 children. I was angry. I was so angry. I'm still angry. I'm still angry for what the Hamas ISIS did, but I'm also angry at myself. How could I be so naive? A peace seeker, a person that takes sick people from the Gaza area to hospitals in Israel. Because I believe that that's what we should do. Nobody else would take them. Every time a friend or a relative would say, you can't trust the Arabs, I says, shut up. Don't talk like this. These are human beings. There probably are some human beings there. But the massacre was so brutal. The hatred, the planning. They took pills to not feel the actions that they did. To be fearless. We're in a period of bargaining, the 3rd stage of the Kobler-Ross scale. We're bargaining between us and ourselves about what best would be for us in order to help the evacuees, the soldiers in the front, We ask ourselves, is it the right thing to do to invade Gaza and try to demolish Hamas, ISIS, or just wait and try to redeem all the captive first? We're bargaining. Because we have never been in a situation like this since the Holocaust. If you remember all the heroes of the Holocaust, Schindler's List, remember that? You must remember Schindler's List. And others. Other righteous of nations that we believed we left behind because we're in a different world. The state of Israel is strong. We're independent. You trust us. We trust ourselves. The American administration trusts us. Apparently, every conception breaks at the end. It happened in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, and it happens again now. The conception of the government that Hamas is the one that we need to protect, nourish, and the Palestinian Authority should be getting all the flack, was wrong. Israel intelligence was sleeping somewhere. We have to admit that, because otherwise we will not get over it. We are far, far from being depressed. And we are even further away from accepting the things that happen. We're in the bargaining period. We want our children back. 212 captive are behind bars and underground in Gaza, including babies and 85 and 90-year-old men and women. It hurts. It paralyzes. But what is so promising is that communities like ours moved immediately into action. I already held a special community gathering that same Shabbat. At 10:30 in the morning, as I said before, I sent everybody a recorded message, a short film saying, "We are together. If you need something, call me." At 7 o'clock at night, we did Havdalah together. What I learned from reading Holocaust books is being together strengthens the people. I wanted my people tied to me and to themselves. The next morning, we started collecting the 178 soldiers in active duty and in reserve duty that belong to my community. 178 soldiers, of which more than half are in active duty. The rest are in reserve duty and other security forces. We got the name, we got the telephone number, and we got the location. Within 3 days, ladies and gentlemen, within 3 days, we managed to reach each and every one of them and bring them a package of love from their community and from their home, in which they had food, toiletry, and clothes. Within the next 10 days, we did a second round to all 178. Each and every one is counted. Each and every one needs to know that when they go into the battle tonight, tomorrow morning, or the next day, they have a big family behind them. and that we need their protection. And they know that now. We found out throughout the last 15 days that the paramedics and the medics lack of the equipment that they need in order to go into battle. Israel was just not ready for a battle of that caliber, of that size. I called my friend Noah. He's a veteran in the American Army. His wife is a consul in the American Embassy in Tel Aviv, American Consulate in Tel Aviv. They both serve in the country. She's a diplomat and he's a veteran. I said, Noah, I'm sure you know how to gather your people there. Within 72 hours, El Al Flight 028 and 027 brought huge boxes of medical equipment that arrived at my synagogue and was distributed to 33 units in the front line. Your people did that. I was just a distributor. Every day we have Kvutzat Kudot, command group, of how was the day and what's holding for the next day. And after like 2.5 days, on Monday evening or Tuesday morning, I can't remember anymore. It was the 10th of October, I think. My community manager and I decided to adopt one of the communities that were demolished. I called the headquarters and said, we can manage with our size of community, one community. Give us the one that was hit the most. 80 members of Kibbutz Nir Oz were murdered in the massacre. 80 members out of 320. 80 members out of 320 were killed. I was never good in math, but I think that this is 25%. 25% of Kibbutz Nir Oz are gone. I decided to adopt them. I called their executive director because kibbutzim now don't have mazkir, secretary anymore. They have executive directors. He said, what do you need? And he gave me a list of the needs that he needed. I went, bought it. We went, bought it. And we sent it immediately to the south. They're now stationed in Kehillat, in one of the hotels there. Yam Suf. It was not more than 5 days that our first community soldier was killed in action. On Wednesday night, towards Thursday morning, Ido Kaslasi, the son of our school's counselor, was killed in the Gaza area as he was fighting against Hamas ISIS naval force. We buried him on Friday morning, and we took upon ourselves to also support the bereaved families in the city, not necessarily members of Kehillat Yozma of my community. Support them with a box of Shiva, anything they need, including 30 candles, memorial candles, for every day of the 30 days of the first morning period. And the last task that we decided to take upon ourselves this week is to take care of the security of our own community. We have a big community. 178 soldiers are currently serving in the front, who left 178 families behind, of which men and women are raising their children by themselves at the moment. 178 families that need our help. So as of tomorrow morning, Monday morning, and Tuesday, we're opening a rest and recreation center in the synagogue. Now you have to understand our synagogue is a prefab one-room building, which can hold 80 people at the most at once. And it changes functions all the time. So from tomorrow morning and more, when most of the equipment will arrive on Tuesday morning, parents, when they pick up their children from the different frameworks, the 6 preschool classes and the 18 elementary school classes, will be able to stop by, pick up a bag, and find materials to entertain their children whose father or mother or both are currently serving in the front line. 6 desks for a community of 1,000 families take care of the active duty soldiers, reserve duty soldiers, medics, the members of Kibbutz Nir Oz that were evacuated to Eilat, the bereaved families, and the emergency needs of our own family. And this is just the beginning. I told the executive director of Nir Oz, the kibbutz in the south, that 80 people of his members were killed. I told him that I will be his Ikea Minister. You know what it means to be an Ikea Minister? That anything that he can buy in Ikea, I'll go and buy for him. He won't need to bother. 240 sets of silverware, we'll do it for him. 240 sets of new dishes, we'll do it for him. The cabinet, the library. It will take years to recreate the communities there. And we will be years alongside with them. Because the other option, according to the Kubler-Ross scale, is to fall into depression. We don't have the luxury of going into that area. We don't. And as one who studied the Holocaust so deeply and thoroughly, we cannot accept this, neither. This is just unacceptable. One last sentence. I was talking to you about what was happening in the South. The experience that we have gone through by the surprise attack and the fast action of the backbone of our community. We haven't started yet with the northern border of Israel, the area where I grew up. There are tens of thousands of members of the kibbutzim and the city of Kiryat Shmona along the northern border that were evacuated already to shelters. Because now the government is afraid that the Hezbollah will evacuate the border and do the same thing that those animals did in the south. So in order to prevent that, I don't want to be precise because I may be wrong, but I think 160,000 residents of the northern border of Israel have been displaced. I have my children in the front. I'm worried to the bottom of my worries. Each and every staff member of mine has between 1 and 4 immediate children who serve in the front line. The chairwoman of the board of Yozma has 4 kids in active and reserve duties. Her daughter is 5 months pregnant, sleeping on the floor in one of the army bases in the south, doing her job as a reservist. It touches all of us. I know that it touches all of you. Let's open the floor for your questions, please. Rabbi Blake, please.
I'm happy to moderate the conversation. Let me offer, first of all, a word of gratitude. Thank you for sharing from the heart, from the soul, and from the voices of your community what you have seen, experienced, and how you are responding. And thank you also for giving us a window into a model that helps show us how we can move through our disbelief, our anger, our shock, our grief, our denial, and actually seek ways of being carriers of goodwill and good work. So I know that as part of this conversation, we'll ask you the question, and you'll share with us ways in which our community can be supportive of the sixfold efforts that Yozma is making, that you are personally making to assist where the need is greatest. And WRT is already at the ready to provide that kind of assistance. And I'll say more about that before we conclude, but I'm sure there are many folks on this call this afternoon who would love to ask you a question or share a perspective. So my preference would be less commenting and more asking of questions. So if you can phrase your remark as a brief question, that would be most helpful at this time. You can raise your hand.
Rabbi Blake, I just want to introduce my associate, Karine Siegel, who is our manager of overseas relations. Karine is a great and unbelievable colleague, but also her son is currently serving in the paratroopers in the Gaza Strip. Since my son-in-law is serving as a higher commander with him, I already know that Karine's son has showed courage that no one at the age of 21 shows nowhere in the world. So this is Daniel Siegel, which we pray for his health and well-being and safe return. Please all join me in sending him waves of support and strength. Yes, let's go for the first question, Robin Merrill.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. My 15-year-old grandson is at this very moment attending a future Jewish Leaders of America conference in Somerset, New Jersey. These children have been taught charitable good works and tolerance. What message as a grandparent should I convey to my grandson at this time?
I think that the beginning was more, what I said at the beginning was more suitable than what came afterwards. The message should be that any form of hatred towards Jews or the state of Israel is a form of classical anti-Semitism that dresses and undresses forms throughout the Jewish history. And there is no alternative than us being strong and together. Not that we're allowed to do anything, but we are entitled to maintain our lives and make sure that the lives of your children and grandchildren are part of this world, not encountering anti-Semitism or Jewish hatred of any kind.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm going to ask one while others think of what they would like to ask. I've been reading as much news and opinion pieces as I can, particularly those that I know are reaching the members of our congregation, in addition to sourcing most of my news from Israeli news sources, which I have advised our entire congregation is so important right now, not to just get all of your news from the New York Times or CNN or MSNBC or Fox or any of the American purveyors of news, some of which is news and some of which is entertainment packaged as news. But I read an op-ed by somebody who I know has a wide readership in our community because he lives in Scarsdale, and that's left-leaning opinion columnist Nick Kristof from the New York Times. And his opinion column, I tried to do my best to contain the anger I was feeling as I read it. But he's basically said, well, whatever Israel does, the civilian casualties in Gaza basically are the overriding considerations right now. And how should we respond to even reasonable voices? And I do consider Kristof to be a reasonable voice and a friend, both personally and a friend to our community. He's spoken at Westchester Reformed Temple on a couple of occasions. But I feel like every time he wades into the Israel-Palestine issues, he has immense sympathy for Palestinians, but doesn't quite grasp that for Israel to remain with the status quo after the barbarism that has been inflicted on Israel is not a tenable position, and has not been a tenable position for a long time. It's been a position that Israel has tried to maintain for 17 years. His point is, be that as it may, this will not make things better. Going into Gaza will not make things better. It will not actually address the root causes, and it will only inflict suffering on innocent Gazan children. So I know you haven't read the article, but I think I've done a fair job of summarizing his point. And we're hearing a lot of voices, and that's a reasonable voice. I'm not even talking about the unreasonable voices that are anti-Semitic or anti-Israel screeds, which I don't think Kristof is or intends to be. But again, the article made me see red.
Yoni, listen, living in a neighborhood like ours, unlike Scarsdale or Washington, D.C., or New York, I always read Thomas Friedman, and I usually like what he writes. But some of them like simple solution to complicated problems. Of course, we don't want to get into Gaza. That's why Ariel Sharon returned Gaza to the Palestinians and said, bye-bye. Good luck. We'll make sure that you get millions of dollars every month to sustain a successful, flourishing community that allows you prosperity, life, good food, great tourism, actually whatever you need, whatever you, as my counter-American Jews, would like to see their children and grandchildren. What do we ask? But if the choice of the other side is to channel the money into building tunnels, and when we find solutions to the tunnels, they start throwing first balloons and then mini airplanes to attack the fields and the animals and the civilians who live there. What would you do? What would you do? Let it happen? Absorb it? There is a Hebrew word over the last 5-6 years that we hear all the time. Hachala, acceptance. We want to absorb, accept the other side's needs. Of course we want that, but they need to want it also. The leadership is using. The leadership in Gaza is using its civilians as a protective shield to the terrorists' attacks. It's not Israel's fault. It is not Israel to be blamed. Israel is in a situation of a Jew in Mainz or Berlin or Warsaw in 1939. You're being attacked and you have to retaliate. It is not your fault that you were born Jewish, to a Jewish mother, Jewish father, or your grandparents were Jewish, and now you need to be sent to the camps. It wasn't their fault, and it's not our fault. Stop taking the blame over yourself. We have been attacked, and we need to retaliate.
Thank you.
I don't want my grandchildren to grow like me, in pain and suffering. I grew up in the northern border of Israel. Since I'm 2 years old, I didn't have one night that I slept the entire night. One night. I have bruises all over my legs because I kick the side of the bed fighting terrorists. I don't want my children to suffer this anymore, and particularly not my grandson. He does not deserve to be an orphan, and he does not deserve to live under fear of terrorist attacks. My children are more important now than their children if their leadership chooses to attack us.
Thank you. This, by the way, is consistent with the messaging that I and so many of my dear colleagues have been sharing with their congregations. People who've identified as left of center, right of center, are united in this kind of messaging with moral clarity. And the work near of those of us who have to provide strong messaging for the public is only going to get harder. And I would urge our congregants to remain in touch with you, with me, and with news sources, again, beyond the New York Times, so that you can make sure that your moral keel is not being buffeted too far away from its true north. Linda Markowitz, you have a comment or a question.
So I guess my question is, what is your solution? Does Israel have to occupy Gaza and rebuild it the way that we did with the Germans after World War II, which really created a lasting peace? I think the Marshall Plan was a brilliant plan, and Europe has had a lasting peace really since World War II because of that plan. And we bombed the shit out of Germany. I mean, I am amazed when you see what the Germans have done with some of the cities that were just leveled. Does Israel have to occupy Gaza, and how would that ever work in order to create a people who sees what some success could happen, how success could happen there?
Thank you, Linda, for your question. This is a question that leads me into the inner me. Pluralistic Israeli who loves peace and loves human beings, and chose to not only dedicate my entire career for that purpose, or for those purposes, but also teach and educate every single moment that we have to seek for peace. No, we don't have to occupy Gaza. This is wrong. Occupation is wrong, and it's wrong not only for the other side, it's first and foremost wrong for us. But we have to understand something, Linda, about what you've just mentioned about the Marshall Plan that you have implemented in Germany after World War II. And this is the fact that we are not in Europe. And a plan that could relate to the Europeans is most likely is not implementable in the Middle East. Now, what is the solution? It's difficult. The clash of cultures here is almost impossible because we seek life and we seek peace, and they don't. Golda Meir in the late 60s said, until they love their children more than they hate us. Until then, there will be no peace. I want them to love their children. There's no way, but we need to go there and stay there. We have to clean the terrorist nests. We have to make sure that ISIS does not leave on the border with Israel, and we will. We'll pay a big price for that, painful price. But there's no solution. We have to do it. If a terrorist goes into your neighbor's apartment and terrorizes you, you'll make sure that your police is taking him out of the house next door. I'm sure you will. And the question is, would you go and live in your neighbor's apartment afterwards? No, of course not. It means that you will clean the house next door from the terrorists who invaded and terrorize your property, and then you'll go out and hope that either the world, maybe the United Nations, maybe the United States, will protect the peace-seeking population of the Gaza Strip.
How do we keep this from happening again? Wouldn't you at least leave a security force inside Gaza? No.
Israel should not be the cup of the Palestinians. Israel should not be part of, in my opinion, controlling other nations or other people. Israel should clean the place and leave as soon as it can. Our experience with Lebanon and our experience with Gaza and our experience with Judea and Samaria are not as such that I would recommend anybody to go and duplicate this model. The model did not work. Doug and Marge.
Thank you for this discussion, Rabbi. As a physician, I use the model of how do you deal with a cancer, and cancers have to be extirpated. There certainly can be damage to healthy tissue doing that. But my question to you is, what will be the response of Israel if the goal of eradicating Hamas does not resolve itself in the safe return of the hostages?
When I was younger, I was in the Boy Scouts. In Israel, it's not Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, it's Scouts. And when you reach the age of Itavav, 11, 12, 13, you begin having those dilemma discussions. Two people are walking in the desert. They're lost. There's water for another 24 hours, and the closest, he disappeared. Where's Doug now? I lost you. Are you still? Oh, here you are.
Yeah, he's here.
and you have water just for 24 hours, but the closest oasis is 48 hours away. So what do you do? And there's no, what I'm trying to say, there's no answer. There's no real answer to a dilemma that is presented in a way that is unsolvable. Cancer, you have to fight. Some start with a surgery, some start with chemotherapy, and some start with radiation. Some start with radiation and continue with chemotherapy and end up with a surgery. Some start with surgery, continue with chemotherapy and end up with radiation. And some take pills all their lives. Israel has to take all options into consideration and treat the Hamas-ISIS cancer with all the shells, with all the ammunition, with all the ammunition that it has. And one thing we have to understand, and we're 49 people currently on Zoom, we were 52 before, that there is no other option. Now, it's not, for a cancer patient, you usually say they're survival ratio after 5 years is so and so, right? That's what the professional discussion is. Israel has there's no alternative for the survival of Israel. Israel will survive the next 5 years, and furthermore, there's no option to not exist. And therefore, we have to do the least mistakes that we can in order to achieve the maximum results of a healthy body and healthy soul. Going back to your question, there are 212 captive that we need to redeem. We need to free them. And at the same time, we have to fight Hamas, ISIS, and the terrorism in Gaza. Which one did we start first? Thank God I don't have to be a decision-making cabinet that makes those decisions at the moment. But I can tell you for sure that some will say that we start with the surgery, some will say that we start with the radiation, and some will say that we start with chemotherapy. And they're all right. And there is no good solution to bad dilemmas. This is a very, very bad dilemma. I don't want to be in their feet now, in their shoes now. Susan.
Thank you for that very cogent answer, Rabbi. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Esther, Susan Esther, I don't see you, but you raise your hand.
Yep, so just unmute, Susan. There you are.
Please excuse the silhouette. I feel I'm not appropriately attired for your presentation, but I do have a question in terms of the media in the United States. I don't see, unless I'm missing it, articles about the unity government, and I was wondering how that's presented in your newspapers and radio, and if there is a glimmer of hope with that new government.
Thank you very much for asking. Unfortunately, the Jewish people in general and the Israelis in particular need an outside enemy in order to unite and be together. The unity government currently, which is functioning, is not even covered by Israeli media because this is so obvious that there is a unity government in times of war. It happened in 1967 in the Six-Day War when Menachem Begin joined the Labor Party government in order to fight, and it happened again in 1973 and in other wars. So this is obvious. After 10 months of demonstrations of hundreds of thousands of Israelis against the government, all those demonstrators are now channeling their forces, their means, their organizations into supporting the war with no hesitation and with no criticism. This is time of unification. This is time of being together. This is time of leaning on each other. And that's what the government is currently doing. I have a lot of criticism about those who are sitting at the government, and therefore I will not express it because out of courtesy to the state of Israel, I think we should bring our criticism inside, less outside. But if you come here, you'll hear more about it from, what do you mean? What do I mean if you come here? When you come here, you'll hear more about it from me on the ground. So the unity government, just to summarize what I've just said, the unity government is leading us currently, and we're all standing behind it to get the best results of and resolve both the captive situation as well as the terror situation in the Gaza Strip. I see a few questions on the Zoom now, on the chat now.
Yeah, most of that is dialogue, so I'll take over here. Most of that is I've been engaging with the participants via chat. I've provided, so be sure to check your chat window. And I'm going to bring this to a close. First of all, I want to talk about just assistance and best ways to help you, Nir, help your community, and especially help the recipients of the incredible work that you and Yozma are doing right now in the efforts to save lives, to provide compassionate care for the victims, to support the soldiers who are in the war, to enhance the security of your campus and especially your school and preschool for the little kids, to rebuild the destroyed community that you're paired up with, and to assist you as you and your colleagues are now providing just incredible bereavement counseling, pastoral care, and officiating. And when I spoke to you just several days ago, you had already conducted 19 funerals since October 7th. So I just, my heart goes out to you. I hope that you're doing what you need, and you and your family, to hold one another close and to provide the emotional, physical, and mental support that you need to be a leader throughout this crisis. I know that our community wants to be helpful, and you and I talked about this a little bit, but you and Karine can enhance my message or advise me if I'm speaking incorrectly. There are different ways to give to support Yozma. Everybody on this call should know that WRT has advised our entire community of several places that we've already vetted that are receiving charitable donations to assist Israel during the emergency. Those are in the chat window and they're on the temple website. In addition, the Rabbi's Discretionary Fund of WRT accepts donations, and we have made a determination as the rabbis of the congregation who administer the fund that all allocations collected since October 7th are going to be supporting our friends in Israel. Some of that money will go to life-saving causes like Magen David Adom, United Hatzalah, which are saving lives. And Magen David Adom just built a new national blood bank, which is in significant need right now. The other great proportion of the income that we want to allocate is going to help Yozma in this six-fold effort. And I believe that if you give a donation directly to WRT, the advantage is that you can immediately claim a tax deduction. There is also a program. Kelly and I are overseas members of your community, Nir. Again, I don't know if we can claim any tax benefit for doing that, but we like to support Yozma. So would you or Karine help to close today's conversation with just a little bit of a pitch about what would be the best ways to support your efforts right now?
Yes, thank you. Karine, you want to answer? You want me to answer? Okay. I think that as individuals, as those who support Israel throughout the 75 years of its existence, and Jews throughout the hundreds of years of us being together, you have to choose now between supporting in or out. And we are offering both avenues. In meaning security, guarding bereaved families, children in need of our community. Out mean help Yozma, help the others through sending packages to soldiers, helping medics in the front, and supporting us in the support that we are going to give as the ambassadors of Ikea towards Nir Oz. First, choose what appeals to you, in or out, or both, or not. That's also legitimate. I don't want anybody who is on the call here feel that they're obligated. Think what appeals to you. What's your availability? My desire is to remain safe from the inside perspective of our need. So any funding that will go into that will help us a lot in that direction. And on the out, I need two things. I need to support the 8 soldiers and families that are currently in the front, and the evacuees of Nir Oz. So it's kind of easy. three options. We want to help Yozma security. We want to help Yozma in helping its 178 soldiers, or we want to help Yozma with its helping of the Near Oz evacuees and survivors of the Holocaust that happened on October 7th in the South. Whatever you choose, whatever appeals to you, you can do it directly, but then you don't get a tax-exempt receipt. But I trust your rabbi so much that I couldn't ask more than sending your contribution through their discretionary fund. This will be the easiest, and then you also get a tax deductible, and Yoni will make sure that it gets to us in no time.
Right. And I have to qualify that, and this is a message that all the rabbis who jointly administer the fund at WRT, as well as our executive director, want to make sure that you understand. We can't officially use the fund as a pass-through. So if you give a significant donation to WRT, and you can simply write Yozma in the ledger, but please don't ask us to like sub-allocate from within that an exact amount. We're aggregating funds, and we will allocate according to our capacity. But the fund, just by the nature of the restrictions that are given for that particular fund, the rabbis have to retain exclusive jurisdiction over how the allocations are made. So you have my word that it's all going to Israel, and that a significant allocation is going to be made to Kehillat Yozma in proportion to or correlated to how much income we take. So Nir, we love you. We care about you and your family and your Kehillat Yozma family. Karine, so glad that you were with us. I also want to acknowledge those of my clergy colleagues. I think throughout the hour, almost everybody joined the call this afternoon. Our cantors, our rabbis, we're all here together. So WRT community, this will not be the last such conversation. And we are continuing to address the crisis on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis. The last thing I want to say is please don't miss the opportunity to be with your WRT family this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, when an author, comedian, performer, and educator will be in residence with us. Joel Chasnoff made Aliyah 7 years ago with his family. He's from New Rochelle. He's really an incredible, gifted communicator about Israel. And of course, the tone has changed for his presentation this weekend, but it is all the more important that we show up in force. Thursday, he's doing a performance and talk, I believe, starting at 7 o'clock. There'll be some refreshments. Friday, he's our featured speaker at Kabbalat Shabbat services at 6:15. And Saturday morning, there is a congregation-wide service in the round, which will be another way of coming together in support of Israel with Joel Chasnoff in residence. That's 9 a.m. this Saturday. Please don't miss these opportunities. Nir Barkin, we love you. We wish you well. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Kol hakavod, rabbis.
Thank you.
Bye.
תודה רבה.
Bakashani.